In this seventh part of the United States Civil War Brewing, we are going to show several things, yes, all of them interesting. But there is one that will stand out, and it has to do with Mr. Vance. Catholic media talking to whom? Yes, with him, but they also make an analysis of some situations that are dividing Catholicism in the United States. But look at the trend that they want to implement, and how the prophecy told us about it. The rest of the things to be presented today are also interesting, but I tell you, that is the key to understand how the prophecy is being fulfilled in front of us. And as usual, after this cover we put the illustrious characters, which we are going to deal with today. To make reference, once again, that if you have not seen these conferences presented in North Carolina on June 15, 2024, do not continue watching this conference, because perhaps you are not going to understand much. Watch these first and then continue with this and even with the previous parts of this new series, because this is the way you will better understand everything that is exposed here. That said, we start with the first of the news. Kamala Harris attacks Trump at his first rally after Biden's resignation. I was a prosecutor. I know guys like him. And she makes a portrait of all those guys, which come on no compliments to anyone. In short, you get my drift. In other words, the worst kind, that's what she's talking about, and then she makes a comparison referring to the fact that that's exactly what Donald Trump is like. Well then, this is the continuum and what will be continuous, until God wills it, in which one to the other will be continuously attacking each other. But let's continue to see, because all this will have more reactions. But now something that is interesting, let's see an article from Catholic media. This one is from the National Catholic Register. Kamala Harris's record on Catholic issues, what you need to know. The article is quite a bit longer, but I have compiled just this part for you. Harris has consistently promoted abortion, criticized Catholic judicial candidates, and opposed pro-life pregnancy centers and activists. She has also embraced gender ideology, as well as mandates on transgenderism and contraception that have, at times, endangered religious freedom. Notice that we are shown Kamala Harris as precisely, not quite on the Catholic side, for all that she exposes. But pay attention now, because in Asa Prensa, also a Catholic media, look at the article they write. What does it mean that the U.S. vice presidential candidate is a post-liberal Catholic, and why is it important? Well, here they tell us about this J.D. Vance senator, who is the candidate for the presidency of the United States, the second in command of Donald Trump, so that you understand me. Well, stay tuned, the article is long, but what a lot of things he gets to say. J.D. Vance, the Republican candidate for Vice President of the United States, is one election away from becoming the first Catholic Vice President of the Republican Party. But the Ohio senator, who is running alongside Donald Trump on the GOP ticket, is not your typical Catholic conservative, at least not the kind that has been the norm in American politics for the past half-century. Instead, Vance is a self-described member of the post-liberal right, an emerging political movement that flips the conventional conservative script and emphasizes the good of the community over individual liberty. Interesting about the common good, all things considered. This controversial approach, which is inspired by and also the subject of controversy within the Catholic Church, includes the use of state power to secure its goals, another break with standard American right-wing procedure. Notice what he is saying is brutal. First, yes, he is saying the common good, as the Pope speaks, above the individual. Common good in whatever, yes, partly good, but you know all the other things it has come to imply, and will come to imply. But notice that this part is transcendental. It includes the use of state power to secure its objectives. This is already tremendous, anyway, If you saw those conferences in North Carolina, stay tuned for what we will be presenting in Chicago, God willing, in a few days. Because you will see how all this fits with prophecy, fits with what is coming to that country, and consequently, affecting the whole world. And if Vance is elected vice president, post-liberalism will not only shape federal policy in new and unprecedented ways. It is also likely to have a major impact on the entire political outlook of the American right, perhaps especially among Catholic conservatives. I expect the election of a Trump-Vance ticket will give post-liberalism renewed intellectual energy, argued political theorist Kevin Valliere, who wrote a book on the rise of religious and anti-liberal political movements. Well, you can see there is a lot of talk about this, and over here that doesn't sound like much, but over there it does. Valliere anticipates that a Vance vice presidency would lead to post-liberal ideas becoming more common in conservative circles. This is interesting. Conservative circles will go towards these kinds of post-liberal ideas. We will see what this is all about, even more. Post-liberalism, as the name suggests, is a rejection of liberalism. Liberalism refers not only to the worldview of the American political left, but to a broader political philosophy that places great importance on individual liberty and is certainly the dominant perspective in American political and social life. Yeah, individual liberty, yeah. Well, that's going down the drain for the common good. Post-liberals argue that liberalism's emphasis on liberty has been at the expense of the common good of America, leading to a fractured society, devastation of working-class communities, and ruling elites with no loyalty to their fellow citizens. So, there must be that change, must there not? The liberal order of the world is wearing us down, argues Post-Liberal Order, a leading online publication of the movement. In contrast to the innovation, internationalism, and individualism of liberalism, post-liberals emphasize stability, nationalism, and community duty, themes that were evident in Vance's acceptance speech last Wednesday. In a break with the Republican Party of yesteryear, the vice presidential candidate criticized free trade and globalism, condemned the disastrous invasion of Iraq, where he served as a Marine, and denounced not only the ruling class in Washington, but also the barons of Wall Street. In contrast, Vance advocated protectionist economic policies, military restraint, and putting Americans before foreigners. Together, we will put the citizens of the United States first, whatever the color of their skin, commented the Yale Law School graduate, whom commentators have described as adding philosophical weight to Trumpian populism, referring to former president and presidential candidate Donald Trump. Like Vance, many of the leading figures in post-liberalism are Catholic. They include Gladden Papin, a political theorist turned advisor to the Hungarian government, journalist Sohrab Ahmari, co-founder of the anti-liberal magazine Compact, and University of Notre Dame political philosopher Patrick Deneen, author of two key post-liberal texts, including Why Liberalism Failed and Regime Change, Towards a Post-Liberal Future. These figures have clear ties to Vance, especially Deneen, whom Valliere described as the paradigm of post-liberal thought. Vance appeared alongside Deneen in a discussion of regime change in 2023 and adopted the professor's vocabulary in describing his policy goals as explicitly anti-elitist, explicitly anti-regime, aimed at replacing current government bureaucrats with administrators seen as committed to the common good of America. You see where this is going. In a possible sign of his closeness, Deneen took to social media after Trump's selection of Vance as his running mate to reiterate his recently stated policy of not talking to reporters. When contacted by email, he declined to comment for this article. Papin also did not respond to a request for a statement. However, the post-liberal thought leader issued a statement describing Vance as the ideal choice to carry Trump's brand of populism forward. JD combines a dedication to domestic productivity, foreign policy realism, and a deep commitment to strengthening American families and the communities that sustain them. He is a man of deep personal faith and integrity, a devotee of family, a generous friend, and a genuine patriot, Deneen said. Well, you see how they are putting it, don't you? However, some Catholics worry that Vance, a recent convert, has fallen under the influence of thinkers who have their own agendas in mind. 3 of them took to the pages of the Wall Street Journal on July 21st to voice their concerns. "We hope Mr. Vance is not being manipulated by a small, power-hungry faction within the church he has joined," they wrote. Well, notice how among them, among Catholics themselves, there is quite a bit of division too, Catholicism and post-liberalism. Catholic post-liberals rely heavily on the teachings of the Church to defend their ideas, particularly the preconciliar popes such as Pius IX and Leo XIII, who emphasized social and economic responsibilities to the community. Contemporary critics of liberalism and Catholicism, such as the philosopher Alasdair MacIntyre, are also prominently cited in post-liberal works, as is the political thought of Aristotle. Catholicism has long had its critics of liberalism and related ideologies such as capitalism. But since the election of U.S. President John F. Kennedy and the Second Vatican Council's teaching on human rights and Dignitatis Humanae, American Catholics attempting to advance policy outcomes consistent with church teaching have tended to do so within the liberal order, appealing, for example, to religious liberty protections, the right to life, and the importance of achieving positive social change through cultural change, not legal imposition. Figures who adopted this approach, such as George Weigel, Michael Novak, and Father John Neuhaus, defined the terms of conservative Catholic political engagement for decades. Well, you see how things are changing. All that began to change in 2016. Donald Trump's surprise populist victory not only signaled widespread dissatisfaction with the liberal status quo, but also an opportunity for Catholic critics of liberalism to promote their vision in unprecedented ways. Post-liberalism and the related, if more explicitly Catholic, political theory of church-state relations known as integralism has been especially popular among young conservative Catholics at elite universities and seminaries, and even on Capitol Hill. Do you see where this is going? That church-state relations, that separation, which even Catholics in the U.S. used to defend, is now changing radically, as prophecy tells us it would. Interesting, But critics of post-liberalism are rejecting it, especially conservative Catholics who advocate working within the liberal order, not overthrowing it. Notice how there are still people who resist that, being Catholics. As we always say, there are real good people still everywhere. God has people everywhere. And when they know the truth, the message of the fourth angel, the end, they will step forward and join fully into the fold of God. Now they are in other folds, these people. But when they know the truth, these honest ones, they will fully join the people of God. The authors of the recent letter in the Wall Street Journal argued that post-liberal thinkers depart from church teaching by diminishing the inalienable rights of individuals and families, which predate the state. The frequent refrain of many post-liberals, including at times Senator Vance, is that government should be used to reshape the private sphere according to their wishes, wrote the trio. which included Andrea Picciotti Bayer of the Conscience Project, Richard Reinsch II of the American Institute for Economic Research, and James Patterson of Ave Maria University. Patterson, a political theorist, commented to the National Catholic Register that post-liberalism is an attempt to rehabilitate the right-wing Catholic authoritarianism once prominent in Europe and Latin America during the 19th and 20th centuries. Well, I would say practically throughout its history. But notice that these are against this happening. He added that post-liberals have pointed to the reign of figures like Portuguese dictator Antonio de Oliveira Salazar as superior to the U.S. Constitution. In other words, that in short, the Constitution of the United States when they rule, not those who are against it, which I am talking about them now, but those of Vance and company, will blow up, because there are other things that deserve to be superior, it seems to be. Impressive, we are seeing the prophecy about to be fulfilled in front of us. What was written by the Adventist pioneers, and especially Ellen White, the prophetess of the Lord, in 1800 and something, is about to be fulfilled in front of us. And so many people still doubt it. In addition, many Catholics have criticized Vance's recent support for access to the abortion pill, a compromise of his pro-life principles that was probably necessary to join Trump's formula. Critics argue that the decision is inconsistent with the senator's post-liberal appeals to the common good. Notice how a contradiction they show him, not. Other Catholic critics, such as University of Tulsa philosopher Jennifer Fry, have argued that post-liberals are trying to promote a stronger political community by bullying everyone into joining. Quite the statements, Ed. With all apologies to Deneen, I don't think you can achieve Aristotelian ends through Machiavellian means. It doesn't work that way, Fry recently commented on X, formerly Twitter. However, some Catholic post-liberals argue that his prescriptions are simply a response to the systemic hostility of U.S. institutions and the elites who run them. Elites who run them. What distinguishes yesterday's religious conservatism from today's religious populism is less a change in principles than an alteration in circumstances, commented Matthew Schmitz, co-founder of the anti-liberal magazine Compact. As religious believers have been denounced as fanatics and excluded from America's major institutions, they have naturally become more suspicious of their functioning. You see, there are even illiberal magazines. Vance's post-liberalism. Vance has intellectual influences in addition to Catholic post-liberals, such as neo-reactionary atheist philosopher Curtis Yarvin and libertarian billionaire Peter Thiel. But post-liberalism occupies a unique place in the vice presidential candidate's intellectual arsenal, given its link to his relatively new Catholic faith. Vance explicitly cites the importance of Catholic perspectives adjacent to post-liberalism in his own conversion story, such as St. Augustine's account of the depravity of Roman elites in the city of God. Vance also told conservative Orthodox writer Rod Dreher that his views on public policy and what the optimal state should look like are pretty much aligned with Catholic social teaching, and that the Church's teaching was one of the things that attracted him to Catholicism in particular. Vance has said that St. Augustine influences his political positions, and the senator chose the doctor of the Church as his confirmation saint when he entered the Church in 2019. That conversion was facilitated by Dominicans from the province of San Jose, somewhat ironically, given that East Coast Dominicans have supported skeptical assessments of post-liberalism, at least at the institutional level. Yes, at least at the institutional level, because the Dominicans, as you know, were precisely the ones who persecuted the authentic Christians the most in the 12, 11, 12, 13 centuries. But you know that they are not to be trifled with. In another powerful indication of his post-liberal commitments, Vance took a break from campaigning during his October 2022 Senate race to speak at a post-liberal conference held at Franciscan University of Steubenville. The conference was organized by Amari and included figures such as Deneen and Papin as keynote speakers. The post-liberal movement has been gaining traction in Catholic intellectual circles for years. But with an adherent like Vance one step away from the second highest office in the land, it has the opportunity to have a much greater impact. And boy, it's going to. The importance of this moment was evident last Thursday when Donald Trump mentioned his new running mate at the Republican National Convention. Looking at Vance during his closing convention speech, Trump shared a simple piece of advice with his apparent successor, JD. You're going to be doing this for a long time, so enjoy the ride. If that's the case, then Catholic conservatives should also prepare for a journey, one that could take the American right in a decidedly post-liberal direction. This original article also appeared in the Catholic Register. ACI Prensa passed it on and published it as well, thus translated into Spanish. You can see what a situation is brewing in the United States, and yes, we have spoken of civil war, but we must speak of what will happen after that civil war, where there will be a return to a Christianity, in quotation marks, where the separation of church and state will be blown up, where the Constitution of the United States will be cornered and totally set aside, not to say crushed. Because that is necessary for them to impose the Sunday law, and they can go against God's Sabbath, against those true keepers of that holy day, which is still God's sign for His people. And people have no idea why this is happening. They may argue on a political level that this is this way, that is that way, this idea is better than the other. I am a supporter of this and not of that. But this is really a religious question, a question really of Satan against Christ, of Satan and his angels, and the minions who use the earth to go against Christ and his angels, but in the form of who, basically, against those he can go against, which is not against them directly, but against the people of God who are still on earth. And all this is being cooked up in front of us, and the prophecy said so. And there are still people who say that Ellen White was not a prophetess of the Lord, because when she wrote that in the 1800 and something years, they said that it was impossible for that to happen in the United States, that it was solemn nonsense. Well, here it is. And that is why I continue to recommend that you read the book The Great Controversy by Ellen White. We are reading a part of it every week, and we are commenting on it. And of course, how it all fits together perfectly. There she also speaks in a certain way of those characters like the Dominicans who went against the people of God already in those years. And we will also deal with that in the Cathar themes, God willing, and what a lot of things we are going to show. But the thing is that we will go back to what happened before. The separation of the state church will be dynamited, and consequently the same will happen as before, persecution against the authentic people of God. And there many will have to define themselves, become the true people of God, and those who are already in it remain, or leave everything and go to the opposite side. To become even opponents, and we are getting there fast, and many are not aware of this. Our duty is to continue telling the truth, to continue proclaiming the prophecy so that people see that the fulfillment is authentic, it is literal, and everything is ready for the return of Christ. But before, all these things and more that we are commenting in other conferences must happen. But well, having said all this, Trump describes Kamala Harris as a lunatic who wants to execute babies up to the 9th month of pregnancy. She would be the most radical far-left extremist to ever occupy the White House, he says. You see, the division, totally overt. Yes, of course, that always happens in politics in the United States and in so many other countries, but they are really attacking each other in a way that is disgusting. It is disgusting to think that it is the leaders of the great nation who are doing this. You think, if they do this, what are the others going to do? Well, this is what is happening in so many places where politics is turning into a splash of insults, defamations, misrepresentations, and all for the sake of obtaining power. In short, it is what it is, and thank God, there must still be some politicians everywhere who are real, sincere, honest, good people, but it seems that they are becoming scarcer and scarcer. And looking at the final picture of the prophecy, it is not surprising. Well, look what it says here. The mogul, who traveled a key swing state in which he has an advantage and must win if he wants to close the path to victory for the Democrats, noted that the vice president is the ultraliberal driving force behind every Biden catastrophe. Trump, who is known for giving pejorative nicknames to his opponents, referred to the vice president as lying Kamala Harris and criticized her work in the White House, especially with regard to her handling of U.S. immigration policy. There has never been such a lunatic in the White House. She would be the most radical far-left extremist ever to occupy it, the Republican candidate noted, adding that she is too liberal on abortion as well. She wants abortions in the 8th and 9th month of pregnancy. That's the execution of a baby, he said. And so you see how the division is becoming more and more clear, the country more and more fragmented. And this article also appears. Trump claims that Harris, whose husband is Jewish, is totally against Jewish people. In fact, she is the first vice president to have a Jewish spouse. And we covered this years ago. Well, look now what comes out here. Donald Trump baselessly claimed that Kamala Harris is totally against Jewish people, apparently forgetting or ignoring the fact that her husband is Jewish. At a rally in Charlotte, North Carolina, on Wednesday night, the Republican candidate criticized his likely presidential election rival for not attending Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to a joint session of Congress earlier in the day. But Trump seemed completely oblivious to the existence of the second gentleman Doug Emhoff, the first Jewish spouse of a vice president in American history, when he made his unsubstantiated claim that Harris was against the Jewish people. What she's doing now is running away from Israel, Trump said at his rally. She refuses to go to. Bibi Netanyahu is in Washington. She refuses to be there. Harris's office said she was unable to attend the joint session on Capitol Hill due to a previously scheduled trip to Indianapolis, but planned to meet with Netanyahu on Thursday, according to The Hill, which he has already done. Even if you're against Israel or the Jewish people, show up and listen to the concept, Trump continued. But she's totally against the Jewish people. The former president then reiterated his criticism of Jews who vote for Harris's party. I'm surprised that Jews would vote for Democrats when they're being treated so disrespectfully and so badly, he said. I'm shocked. It's shocking. I don't understand it. I don't get it. Well, you see the kind of statements. Yes, she was no longer there when Benjamin Netanyahu was in Washington speaking, and so many other Democrats weren't there either. Well, that's the conclusion that Donald Trump draws, and that's how he popularizes the public. Does anyone really believe that he can become president of the United States without supporting the Jews? Neither for one side, nor for the other. But look how this goes on. Ahead of his meeting with Netanyahu, Trump calls for a quick end to the Gaza war. Former U.S. President and Republican candidate Donald Trump explained Thursday that he wants Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to end the offensive in the Gaza Strip quickly because the offensive is decimating Israel's international image. In a telephone interview with Fox News, the New York-based tycoon said that the Israeli government is not very good at managing its public relations and added that the war has already gone on for too long. I want them to finish the job and finish it fast, because they are being decimated by this bad publicity, expressed the Republican politician, who stressed that the hostages must be released as soon as possible. Trump also affirmed that if he had been president of the United States, the attack by the armed wing of Hamas against Israel on October 7th, which led to the current Israeli offensive on Gaza, would not have occurred. The former president made these statements on the occasion of Netanyahu's visit to Washington. So, according to him, this has to stop now. Kamala Harris, after meeting with Netanyahu, the time has come to end the war in Gaza. She did it, you can see. She says, yes, she says it too. U.S. Vice President and future Democratic candidate Kamala Harris claimed after meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that the time has come to end the Gaza war with a ceasefire agreement and the release of the hostages. I just told Prime Minister Netanyahu that it's time for the deal to be closed. So to all those who have been calling for a ceasefire and yearning for peace, I see you and I hear you. Let's get the deal done to get a ceasefire and end the war, Harris declared at the end of the meeting. Harris had previously been photographed with Netanyahu, but appeared alone, with a message that departed slightly from the line of the president, Joe Biden, with greater empathy for the Palestinians. I explained to the Prime Minister my great concern about the scale of human suffering in Gaza, including the deaths of far too many innocent civilians, the Vice President said. What has happened in Gaza these past 9 months, these images of dead children and desperate people fleeing, some for the second, third, or fourth time. We cannot look the other way in the face of these tragedies. We cannot afford to remain insensitive in the face of suffering, said Harris. He also had words of solidarity with the Israeli hostages held by Hamas, and in particular those who are also U.S. nationals, whom he cited one by name. In what appeared to be an appeal to former Americans, she argued that the Gaza conflict is not binary, good guys and bad guys, and that one must understand the complexity and nuances of the history of the region, and therefore called to condemn anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and all kinds of hate crimes. Among the signs that Harris has left of a new tone towards Israel, she was the great absentee. As President of the Senate, she was invited, in the speech that Netanyahu gave before the U.S. Congress, where he promised to continue the war against the Islamic terrorist group Hamas until the final victory. So, they can say many things, but Netanyahu says they will continue until the final victory. Anyway, and you know what will happen? No, we have already talked about it so many times. But there has been yet another meeting. Netanyahu meets with Musk in Washington. The owner of X, Tesla, and SpaceX made a surprise appearance in Washington to witness Netanyahu's speech to a joint session of Parliament. The billionaire sat in a private box alongside the president's wife, Sarah Netanyahu, Israeli soldiers, and at least one former Hamas hostage. Earlier, Musk claimed that the U.S. Democratic Party has become openly anti-Semitic after Democratic Representative Rashida Tlaib called the Israeli Prime Minister a war criminal following her speech, which was boycotted by about half of the congressmen of that political space. During his speech, Netanyahu promised to achieve a total victory in Gaza and to fight until Hamas military capabilities are destroyed. Amid applause and praise from a mostly Republican audience, Tlaib held up a small sign reading "Guilty of Genocide" and "War Criminal." And what they discussed with each other, well, here it says, "We discussed the opportunities and challenges of AI, its impact on the economy and society, and explored ways of technological cooperation with Israel," the Hebrew country's prime minister said. In other words, while they are doing business, they are talking about how to dominate everything, and also, of course, all these types of declarations are appearing, which of course the only thing they do is to put two sides more and more radically opposed to each other. And yes, everything is still preparing for that civil war. Everything is still preparing for what will come next, which will be even worse. Worse? Yes, even worse. But we must continue to tell it like it is, and all are the signs for Christ to return. And thanks be to God that He will put an end to so much barbarism, to so much barbarity that has been done, is being done, and will still be done. And He will put an end to those 6,000 years of sin in 2031 when Christ returns and says, "It is over." I can't wait for that moment to come. Maranatha 2031. God bless you.